Series of discussions on the poetry of Robert Frost. Today's poem is entitled Out, Out, O-U-T, O-U-T, so if you can acquire a copy of that poem, it would be good because then you can follow along. The poem speaks about the suddenness of death as it occurs in all of our lives. We all lose someone rather quickly, and we're stunned by it. Well, that's what this poem is about. But I'm going to talk a little bit about the rhythm of the poem, because I believe that contributes a lot to the way we react to what happens in the poem. In our last discussion, I talked about the rhythm in the poem entitled Spring Pools, and it was very conversational, almost like a New England neighbor talking to you in the backyard of a farmyard or something like that. You know, it's very conversational. And I also mentioned to you that the reason that we were able to do that is because of the stringing of the words in such an arrangement that they flow naturally like everyday speech. And I also mentioned to you that comes about from the use of one of the four metrical feet that are used primarily in poetry, and that is the iamb, I-A-M-B. And then when you string out five of them together, you have penta, 5, a meter measurement, so you measure 5 beats of the iamb. So that's how that works. Today, we'll see that the poem also has that. However, the poet is able to stop us in our tracks, just as death does. And I'll show you where that occurs and how it happens. So I find that rather interesting. Just to illustrate, before we get into the line-by-line analysis of the poem, I like to illustrate the significance of sound and meaning. Frost calls it sound and sense, the sound of sense. And I'll use the two-line poem that he wrote to illustrate it. The old dog barks backward without getting up. I can remember when he was a pup. All right, two short lines, and you obviously can see the difference in the way you have to read the first and the second. Totally different. First is full of consonants, an abundance of K's and G's and D's and so on. These are hard sounds. The old dog barks backward, even a K in there, without TH, without T at the end, getting up. And then the second line is very much like what you would expect from a puppy. And it's the same dog, by the way. I can remember when he was a pup. He was a pup, the old dog. So you see the difference in the way you read it, and it contributes immensely to the significance of what he's trying to say. We see that in other kinds of poems as well. So I'm talking a little bit now about the rhythm before we get into the poem itself. But another one is the anapestic, which is like an iambic, but it's 3 syllables, and the emphasis is on the third. Da-da-dum, 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 da-da-dum. Think of like it was the night before Christmas, and all through the house not a creature was staring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there. All right. So there's a quick moving rhythm in that poem. The opposite would be something like The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe, where it's a kind of a dark poem, dark ebony bird, it's black. He's sitting by the fireside, and there's smoke. And then he has purple curtains, heavy drapery, and darkness all around him. And suddenly, out of nowhere, a bird, a raven, is tapping at his window. And then he goes to the window and opens it and lets the bird actually walks right in and sits above the bust of Pallas, just above my chamber door. He calls it a chamber. So listen to the way it starts. It says, once upon a midnight dreary, as I pondered, weak and weary, over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, as I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. This it was and nothing more. And he talks about he went to explore, and he opened wide the door, and in the stepped the stately raven from the saintly days of yore, not the least obeisance, it's like a bow, not the least obeisance made he, but with mien, the manner of walking, of lord or lady, perched above my chamber door, perched above the bust of Pallas, just above my chamber door, and so on. So you see, the idea is that the rhythm contributes to the poem, and that's all I want. Now, in the poem Out, first of all, the poem itself comes from the line in Macbeth, when Macbeth discovers that his wife is dead. And he talks about the, I have to rely on my note on this one. He talks about the suddenness of death. And if you read Macbeth, you know that he's committed some horrible deeds. And, you know, he's talking about his murder that he committed against Duncan, has murdered sleep, and he can't sleep. And he's totally a wreck because of the guilt, and certainly not a happy camper. So the line out comes from his soliloquy. That's a speech he gives alone on stage, so we know his inner thoughts. He says, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day to the last syllable of recorded time. And all of our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. And then the last line that we're concerned with is out, brief candle. So you see, the candle is the light that has been held for fools to follow to the last syllable of recorded time. In all of our yesterdays, like everything that we considered important in our life, all the memories that we have of things we've done and things that were done to us, whatever, all of our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. Dusty death is an interesting line, because we're, from dust to dust. So that's where the meaning of the poem comes from. Meaning of the title comes from in this beautiful poem. I love it, by Frost. And he establishes the setting. In the last session, I discussed that you never have a poem without somebody, whether that person is in the poem or someone is narrating about the event that he or she is seeing. But at any rate, poetry is about people. And in this particular poem, the first thing that the narrator does is create the setting. He establishes a farmyard setting in New Hampshire. And it's an everyday event taking place. The boy and probably his father are out in the back cutting wood for firewood. And they're using like what we would call a chainsaw, but he calls it a buzzsaw. And if you ever used or listened to a chainsaw, there's a rattling sound when the chain is going around when it's not in use, and then all of a sudden you squeeze the trigger and it goes louder. So that he actually creates these sounds in the poem. And then he appeals to our sense of smell. He doesn't say the smell of wood. He says the dust of wood. It's like in the air. and permeates the whole area. So he says, it begins like this. The buzzsaw snarled and rattled in the yard and made dust and dropped stove-length sticks of wood, sweet scented stuff when the breeze drew across it. And from there, those that lifted eyes could count 5 mountain ranges, one behind the other, far into the Vermont sunset. Day was all but done. Call it a day, I wish they might have said, to please the boy, introducing the character now, to please the boy by giving him a half hour that means so much to a boy. I have to read this. The boy counts so much when he is saved from work. His sister stood beside him in her apron to announce supper. At the word, the saw, as if to prove saws knew what supper meant, leaped out at the hand. So it seemed to leap. He must have given the hand. However it was, neither refused the meeting. But the hand. The boy's first outcry was a rueful laugh as he swung towards them, holding up the hand, half an appeal, but half as if to keep the life from spilling. Then the boy saw all, since he was old enough to know, big boy doing a man's work, though a child at heart. He saw all spoiled. Don't let him, sister. Don't let him cut my hand off, the doctor, when he comes. Don't let him, sister. So, but the hand was gone already. The doctor put him in a dark of ether. He lay and puffed his lips out with his breath. And then the watcher, at his pulse, took fright. Little, less, nothing. And that ended it. No more to build on there. And they, since they were not the one dead, turned to their affairs. Harsh ending, isn't it? What is for saying that they didn't have any sympathy or concern or love for the boy anymore? Of course not. What happens is that we don't die when someone else dies. We have to pick up where we left off and continue and carry that burden. But the suddenness of death can occur like it does in this poem. And regardless of how tragic it is, we have to go on with our own lives and carry on as best we can. But if you noticed in the reading of the poem, the first part is very easily read. It moves along smoothly. The buzzsaw snarled and rattled in the yard and made dust and dropped stove-length sticks of wood, sweet-scented stuff, and so on. Now, the imagery in that is beautiful because, first of all, we hear the sound. The buzzsaw snarled and rattled, and made dust and dropped stove-length sticks of wood. Now, snarling, you show your teeth, and the saw has teeth. And further on, he says, it leaped out at the boy's hand, or seemed to leap. And then he makes an observation, philosophically, he says, however it was, neither refused the meeting. Now, why does he use the word meeting here? Obviously, it's a meeting of death. You know, Emily Dickinson said, because I could not stop for death, he stopped for me. All right, calmly stopped for me. And that's what happens here. It's a meeting that, you know, from the time the child was born, he was destined for this fate. If you believe in that kind of thing, you know, fate, but it has happened. It comes about, his last day on earth, and he meets his death. All right. So, however it was, neither refused the meeting. And now, talking about the rhythm, notice how it slowed down. I like the line, so. I like the word so. He says, let's see, he must have given the hand. However it was, neither refused the meeting, but the hand. The boy's first outcry was a rueful laugh. And as he swung towards him, holding up the hand, and somewhere, oh yeah, so, but the hand was gone already. See, and so, when he says so, what do? We stop. So, but the hand was gone already. And I like the idea of when he says his sister, you know, in her apron, we can see the imagery there, beautiful. When she says it's time to eat, she uses one word, supper. He personifies the saw by saying, the saw, as if to prove saws knew what supper meant, leaped out, or seemed to leap. Wow, that is amazing, isn't it? I mean, the idea that he has this saw grasp the boy's hand, and then the boy swings towards him as he would, hysterically holding up. The boy's first outcry was a rueful laugh. Oh, you know, it sounds like a laugh. It's just a quick reaction, and he holds up his hand because the blood is, you know, profusely flowing out of his hand. He says, "Don't let him cut my hand off," but the hand was gone already. But he said that he was holding up to keep not the blood, the life from spilling. And then it says, but he was a boy, and yet he saw all. He was old enough to know, you know, that's it. I'm going to die. And then the line, the doctor put him in the dark of ether. Now the R sound, it's not a happy A sound. It's almost like creates a sense of grief. The doctor put him in the dark of ether. He lay and puffed his lips out with his breath. And then this line, where the watcher at his pulse took fright. You know, they said, oh my God, this is going to happen. This boy's going to die. They took fright. And then instead of, you know, talking about like, you know, he's fading quickly, then he dies. No, he uses the words little, less, nothing. All right, that's the pulse beat. And then the boy is dead. And then, of course, the last two lines, and they, since they were not the one who died, they went on with their affairs. So, in that particular poem, like Macbeth, like Shakespeare's Macbeth, you know, it shows you the suddenness of death, whereas in Macbeth, the character Macbeth himself sees like an emptiness in the meaning of his life. And of course, at that point, he's in the dredges of, you know, of guilt and everything like that in his state of mind. So life is meaningless to him. And in this particular poem, we have the same kind of thing happen. It's a sudden death out of nowhere, and the boy is struck down, and you know, all of his yesterdays amounted to nothing but the way to dusty death. So in this case, Out, Out, Brief Candle, and he has the title Out, Out. That'll have to do, and I'll talk to you next time.